as you become a lead tech, as you become a QA tech, as you become a manager, you're learning new skills and you're being experienced in more aspects of the department in the industry, but not at the scale that this ocean wave hits you as that brand new person off the street. And you're like, boom, this is serious.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal: to help you fight dirty, every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
Hey there, clean freaks. Welcome to this episode of Beyond Clean. In studio today with Bobby Parker, talking about technicians in sterile processing. And Bobby, this is episode 1 of a long season, the roles that make us great. Really looking forward to digging into this topic with you today.
Yeah, not just technicians, but technicians who make us great. They are the foundation, the rock bed of sterile processing. We wouldn't get any trades done if it weren't for our technicians. So super important discussion to have.
And no matter who you are and what role you have, hang with us. We're going to add value to this conversation, not only in this episode, but every episode in this season that's going through all the different roles that we have in a traditional sterile processing department. So if you have the title, if you don't have the title, you're going to get the value out of this conversation. And oh yeah, you're going to be getting CE credit when you're done. So we'll be right back in studio with the roles that make us great in this spotlight on sterile processing technicians.
I'm Bobby Parker.
And I'm Hank Balch.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
Joining us now in studio is Bobby Parker, our VP of Clinical Solutions at Beyond Clean. And Bobby, we're super excited to jump into this episode 1 of season 23, the roles that make us great. And we're starting where all great sterile processing stories start, at the technician. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, I think this season's going to be exciting. One of the things that has made Beyond Clean great over the years is just hearing from a lot of different voices, a lot of new insights. And so I'm wondering if people are going to get tired listening to you and me talk, Hank. But what I think is great about this season in particular is shining a spotlight on all these different roles that can really help a sterile processing department. It feels like, and particularly if you've only been in one department, it feels like the only options out there are entry-level technician, or if you're lucky, department manager. Some places it's just the technicians and the OR, right? So it'll be good to expose some people to the broad world of sterile processing roles. And as I look through the list of where we're headed this season, I think you and I have held a majority of these roles. So it'll be interesting talking through our different experiences and the different places that we've been.
Okay, that's a great call out, Bobby, on just the vision for this entire season is really going to be to add value to these job titles. Like we see them on the job postings. We carry them on our badges. You know, we're performing them many times, but has anyone ever sat down and really gone through category by category, role by role, the impact that these roles play on the greater mission of sterile processing, as we say at Beyond Clean, of fighting dirty? And so, yeah, we're going to do that this season. And I'll just say, if they haven't gotten sick of listening to us for 6 years now, Bobby, I think we're going to be okay for season 23. So, yeah, let's just bet our money there. All right. So, episode 1 here. we are focusing on technicians. And I kind of want to lay the stage out here, because Bobby and I both, obviously, like most of the folks that are going to be listening to this podcast, we started our careers as technicians. It's kind of rare to come into sterile processing any other way, with a couple of exceptions we're going to talk about in the manager and the director and even the VP episodes we have later on this season. But 95% of everyone that goes into a sterile processing career, you're coming in the door through the technician door. So what is this role? We're going to cover that in this episode. Why is it important? What are the challenges? What are the unique opportunities to being a technician in sterile processing versus the other roles that we're going to talk about in the remainder of this season? So technicians, to lay the groundwork, these are the doers. If you think about this in kind of a football mindset or even like a military mindset, these are the footmen, the ground soldiers, the infantry, right? The masses of troops out there actually hand-to-hand combat. In the case of sterile processing, we're fighting dirty. We're fighting all of these very hard to see and sometimes impossible to see with the naked eye, all these bugs that want to do patients harm. That means that as technicians, we're found in almost every area of the department. You walk into a decontamination, you're going to find technicians. You walk into the prep and pack, in the sterilization, the sterile storage, you walk even to the OR. In the hallways of the OR especially, you're going to see sterile processing technicians most likely passing you by and delivering all manner of instrumentation to all kinds of rooms. So we're all over the department and the workflow, and we are the ones doing the lion's share of the work. So, Bobby, you've been a technician. You've hired a lot of technicians. You may have even updated some job descriptions around sterile processing technicians. So how would you describe, or how have you seen described, the general job description of a sterile processing tech out there?
I've had a hard time describing that personally. Hank, you've been in those same situations as a manager trying to hire technicians, and they have the job description out there. They come in with a mindset that this is going to be like a microbiology lab type environment setting, and they come in and you give them the tour through the department and their eyes just roll in the back of their heads. It's overwhelming, the amount of activity that's going on, the amount of different things that are going on. So I remember describing to technicians that were potential candidates what it's like working in the department. And I sometimes used the illustration of a jeweler, somebody who's working under lighted magnification and doing very detail focused work over a long period of time, so that even in the 7.5 hour of your shift, you have to catch the same minute issue that you would have caught when your eyes were fresh at the beginning of the shift. But it doesn't always feel like that. Sometimes you feel like you're working in a logistics center and moving boxes around, or sometimes it feels like working in a call center and answering the phone. Sometimes it feels like working in a kitchen. We often called the person running the steam sterilizers the cook for the day, because they're building batches and unloading machines and documenting things. So in terms of what it feels like to work in sterile processing, I haven't found that perfect analogy, but it's kind of like a cross between a jeweler and a UPS plane loader. if I had to pick something. But in terms of what a technician is, I'm fascinated by that terminology of technician. We think of sterile processing techs as kind of one of the many entry-level positions in healthcare that we just step pretty well anybody into, teach them how to do it in a few weeks, and turn them loose and get that work done without any credentials required. And I don't know, when I think of the word technician, it's really a skill set. We're trying to build craftsmen, people who have a very high knowledge base. And I think that's true in sterile processing, that it's required when you think about the number of service lines that these sterile processing technicians are going to be handling instruments for, the number of names of surgical instruments. even how these instruments are used, those phone calls that you get from the OR of, we dropped this instrument and it looks kind of like this L-shaped with the extra hook on the one side. And you have to piece together in the back of your mind what instrument they're talking about. It's like, okay, we're talking about orthosurgery. It's shaped like that. It's about 6 inches long. They must be talking about this particular bone hook. Those types of skills go far beyond just an entry-level employee. And so I really like to lean into that word technician and make sure that people who are entering the role know that what they're stepping into isn't just a retail environment or an entry-level environment, but we're really asking them to be craftsmen and build a skill set and be technicians for their craft. So I don't know if that answers your question or just makes it more confusing, but that's kind of where I'm at.
It brings up, honestly, a lot of great topics of conversation, and I hope we'll be able to cover at least a couple of them. But, the place I want to start there is that overwhelming nature of walking into this industry for the first time. That's what happens in the mind of this technician, like you kind of gave the story about when you're given the tour as they're applying for the job. Many times it's like, yeah, everything looks great until you get back to decontam. They're like, what is going on back here? This is not what I envisioned in my laboratory mindset. It's very dirty back here. It's very loud. It appears to be very dangerous. I'm not exactly sure this is what I signed up for. But if you look at the job descriptions, there's a lot of other things that are overwhelming about it. Like you also mentioned the scope of knowledge of all of the thousands of instrumentation, and not just unique instruments themselves, but the combinations of instruments that come together to build unique trays. And then on top of that, you've got all the various medical terminology that's like an entire chapter or two in our textbooks that go like really, really deep, really, really fast. And that's another experience, talking about overwhelming when you first crack open that certification textbook. You're like, oh, chapter 1 intro, not too bad. Oh, boom, get to medical terminology. I'm out of my depth. I don't know if I'm ever going to get this. I didn't want to be a doctor. I just want to be a technician. But all of that knowledge, begins to build. And I think every technician has that experience. If it's not day one, it's, a couple weeks in, they start realizing, man, this is much bigger and deeper and wider and broader than I ever anticipated or could have known simply from the job description, or even anybody who has worked in the department, trying to communicate that to someone and hasn't seen it with their own eyes and done it with their own hands is very, very difficult. So that overwhelming part is really unique, I think, compared to any of the other roles that we're going to talk about in this season, because once it kind of washes over you, as you become a lead tech, as you become a QA tech, as you become a manager, you're learning new skills and you're being experienced in more aspects of the department in the industry, but not at the scale that this ocean wave hits you as that brand new person off the street. And you're like, boom, this is serious.
Yeah, you're totally right. I remember stepping into sterile processing and asking my preceptor what the OR was, because I just never heard that acronym before. Right. So a lot of the folks that we're hiring in, totally ground zero. And so that training process, that orientation process for technicians often gets shorted and undersold, but we ought to be spending a pretty significant amount of time in that orientation process. And so you mentioned in the job description, you're going to find technicians in that decontamination space, on the clean side, assembling and inspecting instruments, in the sterilization area, being the chef for the day, running all the equipment, and then in kind of the storage, distribution, phone center, answering the calls, running around, solving all the problems kind of role. And so that technician is going to need some pretty significant training in each of those areas. And it's because what we're talking about for this episode, that technicians matter for patient safety. And there's certainly a gap between what a good technician is and what a bad one is. And you can push all of the right buttons or have all the right answers and still not be a good technician. So I wanted to pitch to you, Hank, in your mind, what do you think separates the good ones from the bad ones in terms of doing this job well? You can meet the job description requirements, but what makes an excellent sterile processing technician in particular?
Yeah, Bob, that's a great question. It's one I think every leader who's hiring ask this of themselves. And hopefully every technician at some point in their career asks this of themselves as well. Am I a good technician, right? Compared to my peers, compared to the industry, compared to my own job description, am I excelling? And so this is not just like a fun little podcast question. It's a really important question in a career that, many of us commit the majority of our working lives to. Like, we're going to have a lot of people that are listening to this podcast that are potentially new in their career. Maybe you're 6 months in. Maybe you're just a student in a training school right now that's saying, I want to learn more. I want to know more about sterile processing, but you're looking to commit your career. And we've got other folks that are tuning in that have been in here for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. I've met folks out there, Bobby, that have been working in sterile processing for 4 decades. Older, they've been working there longer than I've been alive. Okay. That's kind of crazy to think about, but it's important then. Going back to this technician question, are you not only clocking in and clocking out and getting paid, but are you doing all that you could do or that you should do to be excelling in the role that makes us great as an industry and great as a department and great as a healthcare facility that's giving safe surgery to patients? So what does that actually mean? I will tell you, and I think any sterile processing leader, if they're honest with themselves, it is impossible to know for sure, just based on an interview or a resume, if this person is going to turn out to be a good technician in sterile processing. And many times, because of what we just talked about, the overwhelming nature of the industry, it's impossible for a candidate who's applying for the job to know before they start doing the job and they get in, am I going to be a technician? Because they don't know what they're walking into. And it's impossible to know what you're walking into until you're there and you start seeing these trays and you start feeling the sweat underneath your PPE in decontamination, or you feel the sweat that starts happening when Dr. Jones has called you to room 5 because this tray with your name on it has caused an issue. And then you start asking about your life choices. Is this really what I'm gifted in? What I was made for? Is this what I want to commit to? So knowing all that, because leaders can't know ahead of time and technicians, the people themselves can't know ahead of time. A lot of this experience of, good versus bad or great, it's on a spectrum. And I have seen, I know you've seen too, Bobby, we've all seen people start out and kind of stumble. And if you take a snapshot, 6 months in or 1 year into their technician career, you'd say that person's not going to make it. They're not cut out for this for these reasons. And it's all kinds of different reasons. And we've seen the opposite. We've seen some folks that just killed it on the interview, great resume. They get in, first couple of weeks, it's amazing. We're like, man, this person is going to be the all-star. And then 6 months later, 12 months later, they're gone. Not even like, they may be fired from the department. Are they completely gone from the industry? Like, this just wasn't the place that they were going to commit and stay. It's a long answer, it's a maybe kind of short question, but my biggest emphasis that I would say on judging technicians is you can only judge them over time. I'm not saying like a benchmark, like you can't say if anyone's good or bad until, they got 3 years of experience. Like, you can tell their work product and their buy-in and their passion, 3 months in or even 3 weeks in, but you always got to say, hey, what's really going to prove this is not 3 weeks or 3 months or even, sometimes 3 years. It's what trajectory are they going? And are they continuing to improve themselves over time, or have they settled in their career, in their knowledge, in their passion, and kind of mentally checked out? And we've had episodes that we've talked about, why that happens, the burnout, the mental stress, like that's a protection kind of mechanism that happens sometimes. I'm not knocking that, but great technicians, good technicians, one of the defining factors is they are continually improving themselves, their skill set, their passion, their culture. And I would say, yeah, that's the defining feature.
Yeah, I want to pile on that a little bit as well, and making allusion to how sterile processing is not one static job, right? It's a rotation of assignments that all require different skill sets, different mindsets. And so if you go after one type of person, maybe, the popular one is attention to detail. I'm going to find the attention to detail people and have them in sterile processing. It would be tempting to say that those are the model of good sterile processing technicians. But if you only have attention to detail type people who are very focused, very methodical, and kind of slow, you may struggle on the logistics side of your department of making timely deliveries because the urgency is gone. Or maybe the types of attention to detail people that you've picked out are so crippled by their fear of making a mistake that the work is just not moving forward, and productivity becomes a problem in the department. So there's definitely a broad spectrum of types of people that can and do succeed in sterile processing. And a lot of the secret sauce of figuring out how to make it work as a leader with that technician is figuring out where their natural skill sets are jiving and working in the department and keeping track of that on assignments. So, Friday comes along and that's your big ortho day and you need to put your aces in the right places. You keep that in mind of like where my skilled people are, and, Johnny can kill it in decontam and have no errors. And, Susie's great with the phone and making all that work out together because the department is so dynamic and all of the assignments feel very different. So yeah, I guess when I ask the question, what makes a good one? I appreciate your answer that it's really about that commitment to learning and growing and sticking to it. And I would add a commitment to patient safety, somebody who's going to toe the line at doing the right thing, regardless of how much pressure is being added. But it's not necessarily about who moves the fastest or who has the best attention to detail or who minds least getting sweaty in decontam, because there's going to be a broad spectrum of types of people that can and will succeed in different ways in the department in that way.
Yeah. Your call out, Bobby, I think is really important for any younger technicians, like newer to the industry, that may be struggling and comparing themselves to other technicians that they see, oh man, like that's the one that's getting all the accolades, the recognition, like everyone knows, that Susie is the high performer in the department. But then they look at themselves and be like, but I don't have the same skill sets as Susie does. Maybe my attention to detail is not as great or as natural. Or maybe I struggle to stay on task for long periods of time and my mind likes to bounce a little bit more. I would recommend and just kind of encourage these folks that it is more like a team dynamic. I forget the phrase exactly that you use, but it's this diversity of skill sets that comes together that makes a great department. And you don't want a department of a bunch of clones that everyone's good at the same things, but everyone's bad at the same things too. What you want is that complement. You got some folks that are great at decontam, some folks that are great at the clean side, great at sterilization storage, some folks that are kind of good at all those and can be put wherever depending on the time, some folks that are mediocre at everything, except for they are the team mascot that makes everyone happy and everyone glad to come into work. And like you got to have that combination in the department on a team. And so what that means is no matter where you're coming from, what your resume is, if you're willing to commit to grow and to learn and to improve yourself over time in sterile processing, you can be an absolutely awesome technician on the right team with the right leader and vision. And we're going to talk a lot more about that on more of the leadership roles as we get deeper into the season. So, be happy with where you're at as a technician and be confident that if you do have that attribute of wanting to grow and excel, you will get there. So, Bobby, as we move to kind of wrap up this first episode here, one of the goals for all of these episodes I have for the season is I want to make sure that if someone who's not a technician listens to the episode, they go away saying, that was worth listening to. Or, as we talk about other roles, if you're not a manager yet, or if you're not a director yet, and even if you have no interest whatsoever in becoming those things, we want to add value and have some conversations that's going to add value to the spectrum of the audience out there in SPD, not only internal to the department, but also students and anyone else who's just curious, maybe even on the vendor side. So I want to kind of pitch this question, first to you. A sterile processing technician can impact and has an impact in the department in different, unique ways. And they can do different things that all the rest of the roles that we're going to talk about in season 23 cannot. Can you bring up like one or two of maybe your favorite ways that a technician is special in that way? It has unique value.
I do want to answer that question, but I'm going to pull a Hank and say, before I answer that question, I want to answer a similar. I want to speak to the people who are maybe looking into sterile processing from the outside in. You mentioned those students who are interested in being technicians. And I just want to offer my quick sales pitch for the sterile processing technician being an excellent job, because we've talked about it being hard, it being stressful, it being overwhelming. We've talked about it. We've talked about it being sweat inducing. And of all of the entry-level jobs out there in healthcare, sterile processing, I'm biased, but I think sterile processing best sets you up for having a direct impact on the outcome of people's lives, just in terms of making surgery be successful, because a lot of people are rolling the dice on whether sterile processing is doing their job well or not, and that does have a direct tie to just causing human flourishing through the surgery department in the hospital. But even personally, I think it's one that sets you up for career trajectory growth better and faster than maybe any other entry-level department in healthcare, simply because that skill gap is so wide and the amount of knowledge to be gained is so vast that if you come into sterile processing saying, I want to be the best sterile processing technician this hospital has ever seen, and I'm going to commit myself to learning and doing this excellently, it is not hard at all to be a big fish in a small barrel, if you get what I'm saying, just in terms of establishing yourself as an excellent resource in the department. And it's pretty easy to get noticed. Not every department is going to have the same career ladder, and we're going to talk about that more as we go along in the season, but certainly is easy to build relationships, whether through vendors that are in the department or leaders in the department, and find ways to get noticed to build your career. So there's my pitch for sterile processing technicians. But to answer your question about what technicians can do that nobody else does, I know I felt this, and I'm sure you did as well as a manager, that when I was working in the department, whenever things got kind of crazy and was processing some trays, I would notice things about the workflow that weren't working the way that we thought that they were from our office doors, right? And as a technician working with that every day, you've got a tremendous opportunity just in your day-to-day to be able to impact the workflow for positive good, to identify the things that aren't working, the equipment that's broken that everybody else has given up on, and committing to make sure that it gets repaired and fixed. I think that more than even the manager, you have an opportunity to influence that. And then the other thing that I would say is, no matter how good your policies and processes are, no matter how good your workflow is, if you're not personally committed as a technician to checking instruments adequately and flipping over every one of those cup trials and that loaner knee set, then your trays are not going to be safe for patients. And so you get to kind of wear that crown and carry that burden of personally ensuring patient safety, regardless of all the other roles going on in the department and the spreadsheets that your manager is working on. You actually get to be the one to do it.
Well, Bob, you convicted me because I was thinking back at the earlier conversations, like, yeah, we were talking about how challenging his job was, and we did not spend enough time on the true deep value and impact. So I really appreciate you calling that out. And, this is as good a time as any to remind folks, if you're new or if you've been in the industry, for 40 years, we are the only team on this entire healthcare team that touches these surgical instruments with our hands, right? Like no gloves, on the clean side, depending on your department policy, but we're touching these clean instruments, inspecting them with care that only a human can do. And then the next time that instrument is going to touch someone's skin is the patient. All your nurses, all your surgical techs, all your doctors, they're wearing gloves. They've got some separation from this device, but we're the ones that touch it the last time before it touches that patient. And that's a really cool, awesome, unique opportunity to come in from off the street with no prior healthcare background. Like maybe you went to a school, maybe you got certified or you're pre-certified and you got your hours, but to skip over having to go to med school or to nursing school and to come right in and be able to impact surgery that intimately, really amazing and really fulfilling, again, as an industry like you alluded to. The last little wrap up here before we go into the conclusion, I want to throw out on just what's unique about your technician role. And this is kind of out of left field. You may sound a little bit random, but I think it's really important today where we are in the industry. Everyone knows that we're short-staffed. It's hard to get staff. It's hard to keep staff. You alluded to it's hard to train staff. But I'll tell you from the technician experience, many, many people in the industry will stay in a department not because the pay is awesome, not because they love the leadership, not because the equipment never goes down, but they end up staying because they like the people that they work with. They like the other technicians. They trust them. It's fulfilling. It's a team. It feels like you're valued when they're there. And that's more powerful many times than all those other things I listed. Now, those are important, right? There are people that leave for all those other reasons, but I don't think there's anything quite as powerful as coworkers in your department that you enjoy every single day clocking in and, winning this war on bioburden. It will take you there. Like I've left facilities and gone to facilities because all the people that I like were going to this other facility. Everyone knows that happens. And that's the power of the technician that you wield in a very unique way that no one else in this career ladder does. You can bring people in, you can keep them in with that teamwork. And I think you should really see the value of that as you go forward. Bobby, that's going to do it for this episode 1 of season 23. And as we wrap, I do want to talk to you real quick about what's coming up in episode 2 coming out next week. We're going to be talking about lead techs and supervisors. So we're taking one little step up that career ladder, and we're going to be talking about what's unique, interesting, challenging, what you need to be thinking about before you become a lead tech, if you want to become a lead tech, what you need to think about if you are a lead tech to do your job excellently. So what are you looking forward to in that interview?
Well, let me first just say is how we wrapped up that conversation and just the value as a technician of being able to touch those instruments and be that hand in surgery. I think that's beautiful. So I appreciate that. It's well done. And as we look forward to lead tech, that is the role that people first have their eyes on. Like everybody who's got a year in SPD feels like they're ready to be the lead tech until the manager's gone on vacation and puts them in charge for 2 weeks. They're like, no, I'm not doing that again. Right. So it'll be fun talking through kind of some of the different experiences that you might have as a lead tech, depending on kind of the cultural dynamic, whether you feel like you're babysitting the kindergartners or you're leading the warriors, right? It'll be fun talking through those different experiences. And I'm hopeful that maybe we'll get some opportunities to talk about like how to navigate a couple of the conversations a new lead tech might run into, because nobody prepares you for that when you get confronted with a cruise missile of a hard conversation. How do you navigate it?
And yeah, just like on this episode, Bobby, we're going to talk about that role from every angle. So we're going to be addressing like how do you interact as a technician with your lead tech. We're also going to be talking about the other side, how do you as a manager, director, as a QA, as another specialty position. And then obviously from the perspective of the lead tech themselves, we'll really dig into the meat of that conversation as well. I'm super excited. I love talking about all these different roles because they're so defining in our industry. It's a great focus for career growth in this season. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in and remind you, like we do every week here on Beyond Clean, to keep fighting dirty.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.